Welcome to African Tales and Hearts. Previously, Nanso had begun to sense a storm brewing in her marriage. Emmanuel's mysterious Christmas trip left her with questions she couldn't answer, and his growing distance created a silence she couldn't ignore. What she didn't know then was that the truth was about to reveal itself in the most unexpected way. And when it did, her world would never be the same again. When Emmanuel returned from his mysterious Christmas trip to the village, there was a noticeable change in his demeanor. He seemed happier, more content. But paradoxically, even more distant from his family than before. The happiness that should have been shared with his wife and children seemed to come from somewhere else entirely. Nanso noticed, but chose to focus on her own responsibilities and her daughter's needs. Soon, whispers began to reach Nanso's ears. Friends gave her careful looks. Conversation stopped when she entered a room. Subtle hints suggested Emmanuel might be involved with someone else. But Nanso said nothing. She didn't dig deeper. Part of her wasn't ready to face what she might find. One afternoon, while driving to pick up her daughters from school, fate forced the truth upon her. Passing through a familiar part of Lagos, she saw Emmanuel's car parked outside a small restaurant. Through the window, she saw him sitting with a woman. Their posture told the whole story, the way they leaned toward each other, the intimacy of their positioning, the comfortable familiarity between them. This was no business meeting. It wasn't casual friendship. Nanso's heart shattered in that moment. But she didn't stop the car. She drove on to collect her daughters, as if her world hadn't just shifted on its axis. That evening, she said nothing to Emmanuel about what she had seen. She knew him too well. Confronting him would only lead to denial, to arguments, to being told she was paranoid or jealous without cause. Instead, she began to observe more carefully. Emmanuel never came home early anymore, always claiming long hours at work. His business trips became more frequent, sometimes lasting several days. And most telling of all, he stopped inviting her to work functions, events where she had once stood proudly by his side. As 2011 began, Nanso made a decision that would change her life forever. If Emmanuel was building a life separate from his family, then she would build something of her own. New year. New beginnings. Quietly, without fanfare, Nanso began building an online business using her architecture degree. She had always been talented, but now she channeled that talent into independence. Her dedication soon paid off in an unexpected way. She entered an international architectural design contest. Competitors came from all over the world. And when the results were announced, Nanso had won. The prize money was substantial, and she used every naira wisely. She purchased state-of-the-art software. She invested in tools to make her business truly competitive. This wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. About freedom. Nanso had been raised to be independent, and now she was determined to teach her daughters the same values. She wanted Adis, Ijeoma, and Ifeoma to know the importance of family, to be virtuous women, but never anyone's footstool. While Emmanuel was busy destroying the foundation of their marriage, Nanso was quietly building the foundation for her future. Sometimes, when one person chooses to break a bond, it frees the other to discover strengths they never knew they possessed. And Nanso was about to discover just how strong she really was. By mid-2011, Nanso had tried everything she could think of to fix whatever was broken in her marriage. She had approached Emmanuel's parents, hoping their intervention might reach him. She had spoken with their parish priest, praying that spiritual guidance would soften his heart. She had even confided in his younger sister, Amara, searching for any family member who might help bridge the growing distance. Nothing worked. Each conversation ended the same way, polite promises to pray for their marriage, but no real action. Emmanuel remained distant, disengaged, and seemingly unreachable by appeals to family loyalty or Christian duty. Finally, Nanso made a decision that would define the rest of her life. If she could not fix her marriage, she would focus entirely on what she could control, her children and her business. The first major step was enrolling her daughters in the Catholic school she had always wanted for them. Using her contest winnings and business income, she paid all the fees herself. Adiz, Igioma, and Ifioma would receive the quality education and moral foundation she believed they deserved. Emmanuel never even knew about the change. His absence was so complete that major decisions about his daughter's education could be made without his knowledge. But Nanso didn't stop there. She enrolled the girls in advanced classes to challenge their minds, and foreign language courses, French and Spanish, knowing these skills would open doors for them in a global world. At home, the emotional desert only grew wider. Emmanuel had stopped making love to her entirely. Their physical relationship, once a source of connection and intimacy, had withered away. He was rarely home. And when he was, they hardly spoke of their lives, their plans, or their children. Through her pain, Nanso quietly built her business. Each contract she completed, each satisfied client, each new project was another step toward independence she never imagined she would need. During one of their conversations, Amara offered unexpected wisdom and support. Nanso, don't worry about trying to fix my brother anymore. Focus on building yourself up. Since Emmanuel doesn't appreciate what he has, you need to create your own security and happiness. Amara wasn't offering empty comfort. She became genuinely supportive, referring clients to Nanso's business and encouraging her to grow. She understood what her parents had failed to grasp, that Nanso was a valuable, talented woman who deserved better. Emmanuel noticed none of this. His daughters switching schools. His wife building a thriving business. His sister actively supporting the family. All of it passed by him unnoticed. He was living in his own private world, disconnected from the family he was supposed to cherish. Sometimes, when a person becomes so focused on what they think they want elsewhere, they become blind to the treasures they already possess. Emmanuel was about to learn that lesson in the hardest way possible, by losing everything he had taken for granted. While he chased distractions, Nanso was building something far more valuable than he realized. And soon, the foundation she was laying would prove to be the salvation not only for herself, but for her daughters as well. In late 2011, Emmanuel came home with news that would change everything, though not in the way he presented it. My company is sending me on a work assignment to Canada for 6 months. It's a great opportunity for my career. Nanso listened carefully, but something didn't sit right. Having been married to an oil and gas engineer for over a decade, she knew how these international assignments usually worked. Will we be able to join you? Usually, when companies send employees on long-term assignments, families have the option to relocate together. No. I'm going alone. That's not an option for this assignment. Nanso knew this was unusual. Most oil companies offered relocation for families on assignments longer than 3 months. But she remained silent, filing the information away with all the other inconsistencies in Emmanuel's behavior. Don't worry. I'll be back to visit every 6 weeks. It will pass quickly. And so, Emmanuel departed for his assignment in Canada, leaving Nanso to manage their household and children alone. She continued caring for Adiz, Igioma, and Ifioma, supported by her own family and by Emmanuel's younger sister, Amara. But Emmanuel's promises proved as empty as his explanations. He rarely called. And when he did, the conversations were brief and impersonal. He never came home to visit as promised. When Nanso or the children tried to reach him, he was always quick to end the call, claiming to be busy with work or too tired after long days. On more than one occasion, Nanso heard a woman's voice in the background. Emmanuel, I keep hearing a woman's voice when we talk. Who is that? I'm at a coworker's house. That's his wife's voice you're hearing. The explanation came too quickly. Too rehearsed. But Nanso said nothing, simply noting another piece of evidence in the growing case against her husband's honesty. Meanwhile, at home, life flourished in unexpected ways. The girls excelled at school beyond anyone's expectations. Both Adiz and Igioma advanced so quickly they each skipped a grade, a testament to the quality of education and support Nanso provided. Notably, Emmanuel's parents never called or visited while their son was abroad. Their silence spoke volumes about their priorities and their lack of concern for the grandchildren left behind. Then one day, while cleaning Emmanuel's closet, Natso discovered something that would change everything. Hidden in the pocket of one of his jackets were old boarding passes from a so-called business trip before the Canada assignment. One boarding pass bore Emmanuel's name, as expected. But the other was for a woman. Flora Akagwu. Same flight. Same date. Same destination. That evening, after putting her daughters to bed, Natso did what any woman in 2012 would do. She searched the name on Facebook. When the profile picture appeared, her heart stopped. It was the same woman she had seen with Emmanuel at that restaurant months earlier. The same posture. The same intimacy. Now she had confirmation. And a name. Flora Akagwu. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. And the picture they formed was one of deliberate deception, deeper and darker than Natso had ever imagined. Life has a way of revealing truth in the most unexpected moments. For Natso, that moment came on an ordinary afternoon in a supermarket parking lot in Lagos. As she finished loading her shopping bags into the trunk, she heard a familiar voice call her name. It was Adunni, one of Emmanuel's co-workers from the oil company. A woman she had met at several office functions over the years. Natso. How lovely to see you. How are the children doing? Adunni. They're doing very well, thank you for asking. Adiz and Ijeoma both skipped grades this year. That's wonderful. You should be so proud. Then, without any warning or awareness of the bomb she was about to drop, Adunni continued. I'm so sorry that you and Emmanuel's marriage didn't work out. These things are always difficult, especially with children involved. The world seemed to stop. Natso felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. Adunni kept talking, unaware of the devastation her words had just caused. How did you find out about that? Natso asked, her voice trembling. Oh, I met his new wife at the company's end-of-year event last month. Lovely woman. Flora, I think her name was. Natso could not wait to get away. She made polite excuses, hurried into her car, and drove off, her mind reeling from what she had just learned. Now she had solid confirmation of what she had suspected for months. Emmanuel hadn't just been unfaithful, he had publicly introduced Flora as his wife. Their marriage was over. And she had been the last to know. The betrayal cut deeper than anything she had ever felt. The man she had loved and supported for over a decade had replaced her, while she stayed at home raising his children and maintaining the facade of a marriage that no longer existed. Her first instinct was to call Amara, Emmanuel's sister, her closest ally in the family. But what she heard only deepened the wound. Amara, I just found out Emmanuel is introducing Flora as his wife at company events. Did you know about this? There was a pause. Then Amara's voice came softly. Yes, Natso. I knew. Another betrayal. The one person who had stood by her side had kept this secret. Within the hour, Amara was at her house, trying to comfort her. At first, Natso was too angry to listen. But eventually, she let her speak. Natso, it was so difficult for me to tell you. How do you tell someone their husband has completely betrayed them? That's why I always encouraged you to build your business, why I referred clients to you. I wanted you to be strong and independent when the truth finally came out. Through Amara's painful honesty, Natso finally understood the full extent of Emmanuel's deception. He had taken Flora with him to the village that Christmas, the one he had claimed was family business. And yes, Flora had been with him in Canada. They had lived together as husband and wife. That night, Natso mourned. Not only the loss of her marriage, but the realization that it had been dead much longer than she had known. She had been fighting to save something Emmanuel had discarded long ago. As she always did in times of crisis, Natso turned to God. That evening, she gathered Adiz, Ijeoma, and Ifeoma around her, and they prayed together. From that night forward, evening prayer became their ritual. She also began taking them with her on visits to the Blessed Sacrament. In her deepest pain, Natso found her greatest strength. Her marriage had been destroyed by betrayal. But her faith, her children, and her resilience would carry her through the darkness. Sometimes, when everything we thought we could depend on crumbles away, we discover that the most important foundations, faith, family, and our own inner strength, were there all along, waiting to support us. When Emmanuel returned from his 6-month assignment in Canada, Nanso made a decision that would define her character for years to come. Despite knowing the truth about Flora, despite the devastating confirmation of his betrayal, she did not confront him, nor did she reveal what she had learned. This wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Nanso had learned that confronting Emmanuel only led to gaslighting, arguments designed to make her question her own reality. Instead, she chose silent observation and careful planning. Life continued, but everything had changed. Nanso and Emmanuel were like two strangers sharing a house, going through the motions of marriage, while living completely separate lives. The girls sensed the distance, but adapted as children do. They focused on their studies and leaned on the stability their mother provided. Nanso maintained normalcy for their sake, while quietly preparing for whatever came next. The following Christmas proved nothing had truly changed. Once again, Emmanuel announced he would be traveling to the village, alone. "I'll be spending Christmas in the village this year. Some family matters to handle." This time, Nanso didn't even react. She simply made her own plans, taking Adiz, Ijeoma, and Ifeoma to spend the holidays with her family in Ibadan. Her parents and siblings welcomed them with genuine warmth and love, a sharp contrast to the coldness they always felt from Emmanuel's family. When they returned, Emmanuel's absences became even more frequent. Some nights, he didn't come home at all, brushing it off with tired excuses. "Emmanuel, you didn't come home last night. Where were you?" "I had to stay late for a project." Sometimes these things require overnight work. The lies had become so routine that Emmanuel no longer put effort into making them believable. And Nanso had reached a point where she no longer cared enough to challenge them. The final straw came when Emmanuel refused to attend her parents' anniversary party, a significant family celebration that any devoted husband would prioritize. "Emmanuel, my parents' anniversary celebration is next weekend. It would mean so much to them if you were there. I can't make it. Too much work to catch up on." Brokenhearted but no longer surprised, Nanso attended with her daughters. When family members asked about Emmanuel's absence, she gave polite excuses, protecting his reputation, even as he destroyed their marriage. That night, driving home from the celebration, Nanso made a definitive decision about her future. She would focus entirely on what mattered most: her children, herself, and her business. Her business success had already allowed her to rent a proper office in Bogota, not far from their home. The separation between her work and her troubled marriage felt symbolic. She was building something entirely her own, something Emmanuel could neither touch nor destroy. As the weeks passed, Nanso came to a powerful realization: she would not be a victim of Emmanuel's choices. She would be a survivor. More importantly, her children were watching. Adiz, Ijeoma, and Ifeoma saw their mother handle betrayal with dignity. They saw her build a business with determination. They saw her hold onto her faith, despite circumstances that would have crushed many. These were lessons more valuable than any formal education. Nanso understood that her daughter's sense of self-worth would be shaped by how she responded to this crisis. And she refused to model victimhood. Instead, she would show them that a woman could survive anything, with faith, with hard work, and with unshakable self-respect. The marriage was dead. But Nanso Attica was very much alive, stronger every single day. By 2013, Nanso had made a decision that would change everything. Using her business profits, she bought a beautiful house in Alupaju, a fresh start for herself and her daughters, far from the toxic memories of their current home. She furnished it carefully, creating a warm, welcoming environment. Then, methodically, she moved all of her and her daughters' important belongings into that house. It wasn't just a new home, it was a declaration of independence. Summer break was approaching, and Nanso felt her girls deserved something special. Adiz was now 10, Ijeoma 8, and little Ifeoma 7. They had been through so much upheaval in their young lives. They deserve joyful memories. The timing seemed perfect when Emmanuel sent her a message one afternoon about yet another sudden work trip. The company is sending me on a last-minute assignment. I'll be gone for 3 weeks. Handle everything at home. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. She called him immediately. Emmanuel, I want to take the children on a proper holiday during their summer break. They haven't had a family vacation in 4 years. That would be too expensive, Nanso. I don't have money for unnecessary trips. But Nanso was persistent. Her children deserved better than a father who was absent even when he was present, who couldn't be bothered to create happy memories with them. Emmanuel, these are your children. They need this. They need to know their father cares enough to invest in their happiness. Do as you like, Nanso. I have no money for this, and I'm stressed about work and my upcoming trip. Do as you like. Those 4 words gave Nanso exactly the permission she needed. The day before the children's last day of school, Emmanuel left for his official trip. He barely said goodbye to his daughters, focused entirely on his luggage and his departure plans. The day after Adiz, Ijeoma, and Ifeoma finished school, Amara arrived to take them to Murtala Muhammad International Airport. The girls were practically bouncing with excitement. This was their very first trip abroad. Mummy, I can't believe we're really going to Canada. Wait until I tell my friends at school. Nanso watched her daughter's joy with deep satisfaction. This was what childhood should look like: excitement, adventure, and the security of knowing they were loved and valued. But as they made their way toward the boarding gate, fate had one more revelation in store. There, sitting in the business class lounge near their gate, were 2 familiar figures. Emmanuel and Flora. Clearly traveling together. Clearly comfortable in each other's company. The man who had just told his wife he had no money for his children's vacation was sitting in business class with his girlfriend, headed to the same destination as his family, who were traveling in economy. Nanso saw the complete picture. The work trips to Canada. The excuses about financial stress. The endless lies about why he couldn't spend money on his children. All of it had been to cover the fact that he was maintaining a completely separate life with Flora. The final piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. And ironically, it happened at the exact moment when Nanso was taking control of her own destiny and giving her daughters the life they deserved. Sometimes, the truth is revealed precisely when we're strong enough to face it and ready to act on it. The moment Emmanuel spotted Nanso and his daughters boarding the same flight, his shock was unmistakable. This was not part of his carefully constructed plan to live 2 separate lives in 2 different countries. Nanso was equally stunned and deeply angry, but she said nothing. Instead, she focused on Adiz, Ijeoma, and Ifeoma, helping them settle into their economy seats, making sure they were comfortable and excited about their first big adventure. Fortunately, the children didn't notice their father on the flight. They were too busy marveling at the airplane meals, the tiny windows, and the clouds below. But the confrontation Nanso had been dreading was waiting at Pearson International Airport in Ontario. As she guided her daughters through baggage claim, Emmanuel appeared beside them. The children's faces lit up with surprise. "Daddy, you're here. Did you come to surprise us? This is the best vacation ever." In the background, Flora lingered at a distance, her expression smug, as if the unfolding drama were meant for her amusement. Emmanuel's tone was sharp, his mask slipping. "Nanso, what are you doing here? How did you get money for this trip? How did you even get visas without my consent?" Nanso kept her voice calm, deliberate. "Emmanuel, you told me to do as I liked. Our children deserved a holiday. They haven't had one in 4 years." She collected the bags, walking toward the exit without looking back. Emmanuel trailed her, questions turning into demands. "Where are you going? Who are you staying with? You can't just show up in Canada without planning." Outside, her cousin was waiting. Together they loaded the children and luggage into the car, leaving Emmanuel standing in the pickup area, Flora by his side, his glare heavy but powerless. During the ride, the children's questions came softly. "Mummy, why didn't Daddy come with us? Why was that lady with him? Is Daddy working here too? Will we see him during our vacation? Nanso answered gently, keeping her explanations light, careful not to burden them with truths too heavy for their young hearts. But Adiz, the eldest at 10, saw more than her sisters. Her quiet, knowing gaze told Nanso she was already piecing things together. Almost immediately, Emmanuel began bombarding her phone with calls and messages. She replied to a few, keeping her tone polite for the girls' sake, even encouraging them to call their father. Ijeoma and Ifeoma eagerly took the phone, but Emmanuel's stress and anger came through in every word, confusing them, dimming their joy. After that, Nanso decided he would not spoil their trip any further. Get back to Nigeria immediately. This is unacceptable, he demanded. I heard you, Nanso replied, and ended the call. Then she turned back to her daughters, determined to continue the vacation as planned. For the first time in years, she was putting her children's happiness above Emmanuel's comfort and control. This trip wasn't just about Canada. It was about reclaiming her power as a mother and teaching her daughters that they deserve joy, no matter what lives their father chose to live. When Nanso and her daughters returned to Nigeria after their wonderful vacation in Canada, Amara was waiting at Murtala Muhammad International Airport. The girls were tired but happy, their chatter bubbling with stories of everything they had seen and experienced. But as they pulled into their familiar neighborhood in Bagada, a shadow fell over Nanso's heart. Something felt wrong. When they reached the house, her fear was confirmed. The locks had been changed. Nanso's key no longer worked in her own front door. Exhausted from the long flight, she turned calmly to Amara. Please, take us to my house in Alupaju. Amara said nothing in front of the children, but her fury simmered. She drove them to Nanso's new home, helping the girls unpack and explore their rooms with excitement despite the day's confusion. Once the children were settled, Amara finally spoke. Nanso, my brother is furious. He keeps asking how you got money for such an expensive trip. He's told our parents everything, trying to make you look like the villain. Nanso wasn't surprised, but the cruelty of changing the locks still stung. It was one thing to punish her, but his own children? She picked up the phone and called him. Emmanuel, why did you change the locks on our house? His voice was sharp, defensive. I asked you to come back to Nigeria 2 weeks ago. What responsible wife disobeys her husband like that? You embarrassed me and my family. Emmanuel, are you making your own children homeless? This is their home too. Go and meet the person sponsoring your trips abroad for accommodation. Amara sat in stunned silence, then whispered, her voice shaking with anger. Nanso, I am ashamed of my brother. How could he punish his own children for a simple vacation? And in that moment, Nanso understood. Emmanuel had done her a favor. By shutting her out so cruelly, he had freed her completely. There was no going back. The man who had once promised to love and protect her had just made his own children homeless. If she had needed any final confirmation that her marriage was over, he had just given it, in the clearest, harshest way possible. Sometimes, the cruelest acts reveal the greatest truths. And the truth was this: Nanso and her daughters were far better off without a man who saw them as enemies to punish rather than treasures to protect. Despite knowing what kind of reception she would likely receive, Nanso decided to call Emmanuel's parents. Perhaps, she thought, grandparents would show more concern for their grandchildren's welfare than they had ever shown for her dignity. Calmly, she explained what had happened, how Emmanuel had changed the locks, leaving his own daughters without access to their home after returning from their first family vacation in years. But their response was as cold as she feared. Nanso, you should not have traveled without your husband's permission. A wife must respect her husband's authority. Apologize to Emmanuel immediately. We will talk to him, but first, you must take responsibility for your actions. Not once did they ask where she and the children would stay. Not once did they ask if Adiz, Ijeoma, and Ifeoma were okay. Their only concern was Emmanuel's pride, not their granddaughter's well-being. Amara, listening nearby, wept openly. Nanso, I am so sorry for my family. I am ashamed of how they are treating you and the children. You deserve so much better. But Natso had been preparing for this day. Months earlier, she had quietly moved everything of value into her Alupaju home. Emmanuel had locked them out of a house that no longer contained their lives. The schools were still on holiday, so she took her daughters to Ibadan. There, surrounded by her parents' warmth and love, the girls found joy their paternal grandparents had never offered. Meanwhile, back in Lagos, Natso threw herself into work. Her business was thriving, her clients depended on her, and she no longer carried the weight of saving a marriage that had been dead for years. Then came the call. Natso, I am filing for divorce. The words that might have shattered another woman brought her peace. This wasn't devastation, it was deliverance. The man who had destroyed their marriage was finally taking legal responsibility for ending it. No more pretense. No more false hope. No more waiting for change that would never come. The divorce papers were not an ending, they were a beginning. The final betrayal had become her final liberation. Sometimes, the worst thing that can happen to us is actually the best thing that could have happened. And for Natso, Emmanuel's decision was the doorway to the life she and her daughters truly deserved. When the divorce papers arrived, Natso made a decision that surprised everyone who knew the extent of Emmanuel's betrayal. She did not contest the divorce. There was no fight, no legal battle, no attempt to drag out the proceedings. For Natso, her freedom was worth more than revenge. She simply wanted to be free from a marriage that had died years ago. Emmanuel's settlement offer revealed everything about his priorities. 2 million naira as a lump sum. 500,000 naira per month for upkeep. A contribution toward school fees, but not the responsibility of paying them fully. Natso looked at the man she had once loved and realized he still didn't understand what it truly cost to raise 3 children. Then came the gossip that explained his sudden urgency. Flora was pregnant. With a son. The male child Emmanuel had always longed for. The traditional wedding was already complete, and he needed the divorce finalized so he could marry her in court. The irony was sharp. Natso had endured years of blame for not giving him a son, only for him to rush to another woman who carried the heir he had obsessed over. Her parents were outraged, but also resolute. Her father, a man of deep dignity, called a family meeting. Together, the Odikas made a decision that would restore Natso's honor in the most definitive way. They would return every kobo of the bride price Emmanuel's family had paid. This wasn't symbolic. In Igbo tradition, it was final. Returning the bride price dissolved the marriage completely, not just legally, but spiritually and culturally. By accepting it back, Emmanuel's family would be acknowledging his failure as a husband and father. Natso would be free. Free from widowhood rights if tragedy struck. Free to remarry when she chose. Most importantly, her daughters, Adiz, Ijeoma, and Ifeoma, would now belong fully to the Odika family. They would no longer be tied to a lineage that had neglected them, but secured under their grandfather's love and name. The return of the bride price was more than tradition. It was liberation. It was dignity restored. And it was a clear message to Emmanuel's family and to the entire community. Natso and her daughters would never again be treated as less than they deserved. The Odika family had given them the most precious gift of all, complete freedom to build a life on their own terms. 7 years had passed since the divorce was finalized. What had once been a broken household under Emmanuel's neglect had become a thriving family of achievers. On a Saturday afternoon, Natso went shopping with her daughters, Adiz, now 17, Ijeoma, 15, and Ifeoma, 13. Fate arranged an encounter she hadn't expected. In the supermarket aisle, they came face to face with Emmanuel, standing beside Flora and their 2 young sons. The girl's response was immediate, polite, but distant. "Good afternoon, sir." "Good afternoon, Ma." And then, without hesitation, they walked on. No awkwardness, no lingering, just well-mannered composure, choosing cereal brands and talking about fruits for the week. When Natso turned to follow them, Emmanuel stopped her. "Is that how they greet their father?" Her reply was calm, sharp, and undeniable. "What did you want them to say?" Tell me, so I can let them know. Next time they see you, they will greet you properly. The truth landed like a stone. His daughters had greeted him as they would greet any adult stranger, because that's what he had chosen to become. As she walked away, Nanso couldn't help but notice his older son pulling items off shelves, shouting without correction. A stark contrast to the composed, disciplined daughters who walked proudly ahead of her. The years that followed proved her choices right. Adis finished secondary school at 16, studied computer engineering at the University of Ibadan, and earned a master's degree in advanced computer systems in China. Ijeoma, graduating at 16 as well, studied biochemistry at the University of Lagos before pursuing medicine in Russia, fulfilling her dream of becoming a doctor. And Ifeoma, the youngest, completed secondary school at 15, studied architecture at the University of Lagos with a minor in software engineering, and later joined her sister in Russia to combine technology with design. Meanwhile, Nanso's business grew beyond her wildest dreams. From worrying about school fees, she had become a sought-after architect, her firm shaping the Lagos skyline, her name known for innovation and excellence. That supermarket aisle had captured everything, 2 different choices, 2 different legacies. Emmanuel's children were being raised in the same chaos that had marked his life. But the daughters he had abandoned were becoming women of global impact, engineers, doctors, architects. Sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't anger, or even words. It's living well. It's raising your children to reach their full potential. And that was exactly what Nanso had done. On a peaceful Saturday afternoon, Nanso was enjoying lunch with Amara at one of their favorite restaurants in Victoria Island. These weekly lunches had become a cherished tradition, a time for the 2 women to catch up on life, business, and the children's progress. Amara had remained Nanso's closest friend through all the years since the divorce, proving that family bonds could transcend blood relations when built on genuine love and respect. As they were discussing Ifeoma's latest academic achievements, a tall, dark-skinned man approached their table with a warm smile of recognition. "Amara, I thought that was you. How are you?" "Nduka. What a wonderful surprise. Nanso, I'd like you to meet my old classmate and friend, Nduka Okafor. Nduka, this is my dear friend Nanso Adaka." The conversation that followed was easy and natural. Nduka was articulate, well-mannered, and showed genuine interest in their discussion about education and business. He mentioned his work in international trade and his recent return from a business trip to Dubai. After about 15 minutes of pleasant conversation, Nduka excused himself politely, saying he didn't want to interrupt their lunch any longer. "Ladies, it was lovely meeting you both. Amara, we must catch up properly soon. And Nanso, it was truly a pleasure." As soon as he was out of earshot, Amara turned to Nanso with a knowing smile, but she said nothing more about him during lunch. Later that evening, Amara's phone rang. "Amara, tell me about your friend Nanso. She seems like a remarkable woman." "She is remarkable, Nduka. But before I tell you anything, let me ask you a few questions." What followed was Amara's thorough vetting process. She had watched Nanso rebuild her life with such strength and dignity, and she wasn't about to let just anyone disrupt the peace her friend had worked so hard to achieve. After several conversations and careful consideration, Amara was satisfied that Nduka was a man of substance and integrity. "Nanso, remember that gentleman we met at lunch last week? He's asked about you. I think you should meet him properly, he's a good man." Through Amara, Nanso learned that Nduka was a widower with an 11-year-old daughter named Chioma. He had lost his wife to cancer 3 years earlier and had been focused entirely on raising his daughter and building his business since then. When Nanso and Nduka met for their first proper conversation, there was an immediate sense of mutual respect. Both had experienced loss and the challenge of single parenting. Both understood the value of building something meaningful from difficult circumstances. Nanso was hesitant at first. After everything she had endured with Emmanuel, the idea of trusting another man with her heart and her daughter's stability felt overwhelming. But as weeks passed and their conversations continued, sometimes over coffee, sometimes over dinner at nice restaurants, Sometimes during visits to each other's homes where their children could meet, she began to warm to the possibility that not all men were like her ex-husband. Nduka showed genuine interest in her daughter's achievements and never once suggested that Nonso's independence or business success were problems to be managed. Instead, he admired her strength and the remarkable young women she was raising. Slowly, carefully, Nonso began to believe that perhaps her story wasn't over, perhaps it was simply ready for a much better chapter. Life has a way of delivering its hardest lessons when we least expect them. For Emmanuel, that lesson came in the most devastating way possible. One Saturday afternoon, Amara shared news with Nonso that would unravel Emmanuel's world. His older son had a serious accident and needed a blood transfusion, but some information didn't match. They ordered a DNA test to be safe. The results were shattering. The son Emmanuel had claimed with so much pride was not his. Suspicious, he demanded tests for all of Flora's children. The truth cut deeper with every result. Neither of the two boys were his. Only the youngest child, a daughter, carried his blood. Enraged and humiliated, Emmanuel threw Flora out and refused to pay the hospital bills. The woman for whom he had destroyed his marriage had been deceiving him all along. But his reckoning wasn't over. At that very hospital, one of Nigeria's brightest young doctors was already making her mark. Dr. Ijeoma Adaka. His daughter. Their paths crossed in the corridor. Emmanuel saw the white coat, the poised figure, and for a moment, something familiar in her face. "Good afternoon, sir," she said politely, walking past. Confused, he stopped her. "Excuse me, what are you doing in this hospital?" "I work here, sir." And then his eyes caught the embroidery on her coat. Dr. Ijeoma Adaka. The weight of everything, Flora's betrayal, his children's absence, the years he had wasted, crashed over him at once. "If you'll excuse me, sir, I have patients to attend to." She walked away with the confidence of a woman who owed him nothing. That evening, Ijeoma told her mother and sisters, "I saw Mr. Nwagwu at the hospital today. He didn't even recognize me at first. When he did, he looked shocked that I had become a doctor. I treated him politely, just like any stranger." There was no bitterness in her voice. No pain. Only the calm assurance of someone who had built her own life, without his presence, without his approval. And so, life delivered its justice. Emmanuel had spent years chasing what he thought would bring him happiness, only to discover it was built on lies. Meanwhile, the daughters he abandoned had become everything he could have been proud of, but by then, they no longer needed him. The man who had once dismissed his girls as disappointments was left standing alone in a hospital corridor, face to face with the truth. He hadn't just lost a wife. He hadn't just lost a family. He had lost the chance to witness the very greatness he had once overlooked. Emmanuel's life was in complete shambles. The man who had abandoned his wife and daughters for the promise of sons had just learned the cruelest truth of all: those sons were never his. News of the DNA results spread quickly through the Nwagwu family, and the outrage was explosive. His parents and elder sisters railed at Flora's betrayal, furious that their name had been dishonored. But Amara, the one voice of truth, cut through their noise. "This is what happens," she said, "when you wanted a son so badly that you treated a good woman like Nonso like she wasn't enough. You drove away the best daughter-in-law you ever had, and this is what it brought: lies and shame." Her words silenced the room. Even their justifications rang hollow now. In the weeks that followed, Emmanuel's anger gave way to regret. For the first time in years, he began asking about Nonso. "How is she? How are the girls? They must be grown now. I would like to see my children." That was the moment Amara had been waiting for. "Your daughters are not little girls anymore. Adiz has a master's in computer engineering from China. Ijeoma is a medical doctor. Ifeoma is an architect, working alongside your ex-wife in her firm. And Nonso? She's remarried, to a man who loves her and those girls as his own. But don't forget, those girls are no longer part of this family. When you accepted the returned bride price, you released every claim to them. Still desperate, Emmanuel persuaded his parents and kinsmen to reach out to the Attica family. But the reply they received was swift and final. "We returned your bride price years ago, and you accepted it. By our tradition, there is no longer any relationship between our families." And then Nanso's mother delivered the words that cut deepest. "Where were you when Nanso was suffering? Where were you when she was raising 3 children alone, building a business from nothing? Where were you when your granddaughters excelled in school with no support from you? You only want them now because they have become successful despite your neglect. That is not how family works. You made your choice years ago. And we made ours." The conversation ended there. No regret, no pleading could undo the years of deliberate neglect, or the cultural finality of the bride price returned. Emmanuel and his family learned a truth too late: some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. The daughters they had dismissed as disappointments had become remarkable women without them. And the woman they had treated as unworthy had built a life so full and so strong that their absence no longer mattered. Sometimes, the price of chasing what we think we want is losing everything we truly need. And for Emmanuel, that bill had finally come due. When Emmanuel discovered that Nanso's marriage had been blessed with twin boys, the very sons he once claimed she could never give him, the irony was almost too much to bear. The woman he had abandoned had not only built a thriving life without him, but she had received the very blessing he had sought elsewhere. The universe had made its point, loud and clear. In desperation, Emmanuel begged Amara to intervene. He wanted to apologize, to seek forgiveness, to try, somehow, to make things right. With Nduka's full support, Nanso agreed to a meeting, but on her terms, in her office, as the accomplished businesswoman she had become. When Emmanuel walked through the doors of Attica Designs, he was surrounded by evidence of everything he had missed: photographs of vacations, graduations, weddings, and a family portrait of Nanso, her daughters, and Nduka, the man who had chosen to be the father Emmanuel refused to be. Emmanuel broke down. "Nanso, I am so sorry. I threw away everything good in my life for lies. Can you ever forgive me?" Her response was calm, resolute, and full of the strength she had gained over the years. "I forgave you long ago, Emmanuel. Holding on to anger would have only hurt me and my children." When he asked to see his daughters, Nanso reminded him. "They are grown now. They can decide for themselves. You've already met 2 of them, you just didn't recognize them." And when Ifeoma walked into that office, accomplished and confident, Emmanuel finally saw the truth of what he had missed. His daughters had grown into remarkable women, without him. In time, after long discussions, the girls agreed to give their father a chance, not because he had earned it, but because their mother had taught them the power of forgiveness. That night, Nanso sat in Nduka's arms, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She had survived betrayal, rebuilt her life, and found love that honored her worth. She had raised daughters who became brilliant women, and she had embraced a new family that was stronger than anything she had lost. Her story was no longer about heartbreak, it was about triumph. Because sometimes, our greatest losses lead to our greatest gains. Sometimes, rejection becomes the path to resilience. And sometimes, broken dreams are only making way for something far more beautiful. The girl who once worried she wasn't enough had become the woman who knew, beyond any doubt, that she was more than enough. And that was her greatest victory of all. And so, Nanso's journey comes full circle. What began as a young woman's dream to design homes became the blueprint of a life filled with resilience, faith, and love. She faced betrayal but chose freedom, raised her daughters with dignity, and found a true partner who valued her strength. In the end, she discovered the greatest foundation she could ever build was within herself. Thank you for sharing this journey with us here on African Tales and Hearts. If Nanso's story touched you, let it remind you that even broken beginnings can lead to beautiful endings. Stay with us for more stories of love, life, and destiny across Africa.